Tonight, bolt the doors. Britain battles a shoplifting epidemic as organised gangs raid high street stores to order. An investigation uncovers a Chinese spy using LinkedIn to hunt British state secrets on an industrial scale. And the de-aging billionaire Brian Johnson shares his bizarre rules for dating. A warning, they are not for the faint-hearted. Joining me on the panel to discuss all that, James Max and JJ Anisiobi, Richard Tice and Isabel Oakeshott. But first to Britain's high streets, which are fighting a shoplifting epidemic, said to be fuelled by families struggling with soaring food bills amid high inflation. Thefts have risen by more than 60% in some areas, with retailers pointing the finger at county line-style gangs operating steal-to-order schemes. Well, earlier this month, London's Oxford Street descended into chaos after a viral video prompting users to raid JD Sports and other stores resulted in riots and arrests. The Co-op has also reported that shoplifting, looting and antisocial behaviour in their stores has rocketed by a third in just the last year. And bigger retailers, including John Lewis, Tesco and Boots, have issued staff with body cams and training in an attempt to deter violent thieves. Well, some stores in London have even resorted to locking their doors during opening hours in order to cut down on thefts. Independent businesses, meanwhile, are struggling to invest in high-end security systems and CCTV as their dwindling profits are hit by the wave of shoplifting. I feel so sorry for shopkeepers at the moment, because it really is an epidemic. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen people just brazenly take things off the shelves and walk straight out. And of course, the shoplifters say, as we keep being told, we the shopkeepers are told by the police, don't do anything, don't try to intercept. And if you do call us and you have intercepted, we're not going to come. And in the last 10 years, shoplifting cases have doubled. Shoplifting prosecutions have gone from an average of 80,000 to 20,000. But as far as I can tell, it all goes back to 2014 or thereabouts, where shoplifting was basically decriminalised. They don't call it that, but it was declassified. And it became a crime. If you stole less than £200 worth of goods, it became a crime that you didn't even have to go to court. You could just pay a fine, like a parking ticket, £70 fine, and get off. And so it seems to me that that's the cause of all this problem. And the businesses that are left, sort of blowing in the wind are the poor shopkeepers.
Yeah, I mean, it is awful. I completely reject the notion that the rise in this is due to inflation or cost of living. Of course, at the edges, there are people who are struggling to pay for food.
But not riots on the
I
streets.
was very struck a few months ago by seeing a young boy basically shoplifting in a little Tesco, and he was just shoplifting a few essential items. And before I could really have a chance to help him, he'd gone. Clearly, that was a need shoplifting case. But the vast majority of this is just petty criminalism, and it should absolutely be rooted out. I feel like it's a real stain on our nation that this is what we've come to, where we just allow this stuff to systematically take place.
But if there's no fear of any consequences because it's been decriminalised, everyone's worked that out. You've now got the situation where it's not just one or two, it's actually gangs of youths with masks, with hoodies. And I think actually the staff, they know they've come in, they know the gang's in there, and there's about basically to be a heist. And all of a sudden, whoosh, it all goes, off they go, and there's nothing that can be done. And it's appalling. And if you don't fear the consequences, this is what happens.
It's not just gangs, though. I mean, let's be clear that, of course, there are groups and organised people, but also there are older people. There are a whole range of people who are doing this. And it does come back, and I think we've all said it, it comes back to the fact that the police aren't there, they're not visible. We've relied on CCTV. Oh, yeah, that will catch people. No, it doesn't. And we don't have a zero tolerance. So I think that's part of it. But the other part is, who pays for all this? We do.
Yeah.
Because whether you're talking about a small shop, we pay because if they're not able to make ends meet, then they're not there anymore. And if it's a big shop, then you say, oh, some people say, oh, they've got enough money, look at their profits. Yeah, but we pay for it because those profits feed into all of our pensions and all of the tax that they have to pay if, they're sort of covering their various taxation obligations. And also the workers and people that they put on. So I think we really need to take a look at this again. I think the government does have to take responsibility, and so do the police. The police aren't fit for purpose.
Well, I'd say this isn't new. It might be new to some of you guys, but working class areas, things are stolen to order. That's how it always used to be when I was a kid, certainly. People would come knocking on your door with a bag full of meat that they take from the shop and they'd be offering you want bacon, you want steak. That's pretty normal in lots of parts of the country. if society has now devolved to a state where we need to be locking shops during the daytime, well, that you go to Birmingham Jewellery Quarter, you go to Hatton Gardens, the jewellery shops, the gold shops, that's how they operate. They're open during the day, but the doors are locked.
Yeah,
Yes,
but
but
you're
that's
saying you
different.
accept it. You can't accept it. You've got to go right back and say zero tolerance, broken windows, one strike, you're off the streets. You're to somewhere cold,
But we haven't got enough
inhospitable.
police for this.
But
Then we need to organise.
But JJ, your point that this has always been going on, it may well have been going on, but it was going on in much, much smaller numbers. The statistics don't lie.
Yeah.
The number of shoplifting incidences has doubled in 10 years. That's a massive
And also, it's very
increase.
different to cite the example of Hatton Garden or diamond dealerships. Of course, you know, all the top-end jewellers and so on have always had to have extra security. But it's very different now when you've actually got clothes shops, you know, and even boutique clothes shops. I'm not talking about Chanel or, you know, the top designers, but just middle-of-the-road places I've noticed have started locking their doors.
But it's worse when you're talking about supermarkets. When you're talking about the supermarkets that we all go into, setting aside the fact that this petty crime is going on and that it's really difficult for the staff and it's bad, you know, for the small independent shops as well. Actually, to be in an environment where you're there and you're about to go and pay, and you can see somebody just half-inch
Take
stuff
it
and
out.
get out. It's a really
And
nasty
also
environment.
those pictures we were just seeing, that, you know, of the Oxford Street sort of riots or you know, stealing to order. You have to look at the role of social media in all of this. You know, that was advertised on TikTok. You know, gangs were getting together, and then of course the role of online shopping in order makes it much easier to sell all that stuff, like eBay and
But
stuff
places
like that.
like JD Sports and Sainsbury's, those are shops that are being targeted, the big ones, as you say. If you go to the average corner shop where people take the law into their own hands, kids are not running to those shops stealing stuff off the shelves because people take
They
the law into
are.
They
The
are.
No,
corner
they're
shop
not.
owners are
They are.
all
It's
saying
everywhere.
that they are being targeted.
I see it in the big supermarkets. I don't see it in my local corner shops.
Everybody's seeing it
They
everywhere.
are. Yeah, they are.
It's,
And
it's off the
they're
dial.
not letting so many people come in just in order to try and control it. And by the way, just a final point that I wonder if all the self-service tills that are now everywhere is actually fueling this. It's an awful lot easier, isn't it, when everyone's dispersed, doing their own
Yes,
checkout.
and you've got fewer members of staff to keep an eye on what's
Yeah.
going on.
And there you go. Daylight robbery.